And we are back.
I don't like it that you did that. So, wrestling terminology.
So do you want me to start from Z or do you want me to start from A?
Let's start with A, but before you do that, give a very start with Z because that's where you had it.
Okay.
Give a brief little synopsis of why pro wrestling terminology was important back in the day and all that fun stuff.
Because we'll say, okay, so way back in the day, I'm talking like Carney days, it was very, very important for wrestlers and management alike to keep their trade a secret.
Tootsmont, Billy Sandow, Goldust Trio, this is kind of where it was.
Yeah, so what they would do was they would use certain terms to call the card, for example. So when someone was on the phone, like a
no,
manager,
this was in Telegram. They didn't have phones at the time. They didn't use phones.
Oh, so it was both Telegram and early phones. But what they would do is instead of saying this person beating this person, they would say face beats heel, heel beats face, heel false finish face, that kind of thing.
He goes over.
Right, he goes over. That kind of terminology so that if there were people listening in or people hacking the telegraph lines, they would not know the results of the match because the language was vague enough for them to not understand, but specific enough for whoever the intended user was to understand.
Right.
And every industry, if you go into any industry, they all have these terminologies and things like that because you couldn't write anything down. So a lot of this information was just passed down by word of mouth. And if you get into any industry, I would imagine, you would have these sorts of terms. Even YouTubers and podcasters, we have terms that we use in our industry that other people, if you go out and ask other people what it means, they won't have an idea. So I'm going to do a little known wrestling terminology. I'm not going to do wrestling terminology that a lot of us are going to be familiar with.
Right.
But I'm going to talk about the terms and where these terms came from. So we're going to start with Z, and then we're going to go off into A. So
Z.
Let's...
All right, so this is basically like a peanut gallery.
Yes, British peanut gallery said Z.
Yes, so peanut gallery is basically going to be running the show. I might add in my own commentary for like clarification if he fucks up royally. So
right. Okay, so let's start with Zabata, which is what I had mentioned before. It is a term for an arbitrary and as yet undefined tool intended to fill a hole in a match or angle. No idea where it came from. I would assume it might be a term from the Carnies, but there's no connection to any wrestlers that we may know.
So, what can you elaborate? Because I'm still trying to understand what. Is it tool by like physical means or tool by
whatever to fill a hole in an angle? It's something that is used to fill what was perceived to be something that didn't make sense in the storyline. It was something that made the storyline make sense. That's what a Zabata is.
Okay. That makes sense.
All right, next one. X-Pac heats. Of course, now we know where this comes from. When fans jeer at a wrestler because they dislike the wrestler personally as opposed to the character he or she plays in the ring. Obviously, X-Pac is the example of this because he had overstayed his welcome with some fans, and he was jeered regardless of whether he was a face or a heel back in his WWF days.
Right, and if you want more of like a current times explanation, King Corbin
has X-Pac heat. People just don't like the guy. Someone who may have been involved in an affair. Yeah, they're going to get jeered whether or not they're the actual face or the heel.
Right.
Wrestler's court, a term often used to describe kangaroo courts, which is just it's not an official court, it's just one of those friendly things where just like a bunch of guys get together. And
so, like in some examples, Edge and Christian gave a rider a preferred seat on the plane because he got action figures, and that rider was taken to this court where the boys were the ones who took it upon themselves.
It's held backstage with a congregation of wrestlers. This is often to settle backstage disputes and transgressions between performers and sometimes staff, such as writers in the WWE. The Undertaker was known as the judge, jury, and executioner, and JBL, the prosecuting attorney at Wrestlers Court during their full-time tenures in the company. Punishment for those found guilty often include the purchase of the alcohol or rental cars.
Right.
So it was just for fun. A vanilla midget. This was created by Kevin Nash, a derogatory term used to describe wrestlers who are good ring workers but believed to be too small and boring to ever succeed on a large scale.
Like Chris Benoit and Eddie Guerrero in the cruiserweights. But obviously that has changed. And actually Kevin Nash took it upon himself to push the X Division when he went to TNA because he actually kind of changed his mind about that stuff.
Okay, a tweener, a morally ambiguous wrestler who's neither a face nor a heel. Also sometimes described as a heel is usually cheered or a face is usually jeered, especially when two faces and two heels face each other. Also known as anti-heroes.
Like Stone Cold Steve Austin or AJ Styles as a current example.
Right, so it's just ambiguous.
Pretty self-explanatory.
Right. Super finisher, a move rarely used by a wrestler, but one that almost always ends a match. Some notable examples: Randy Orton's punt kick, Kenta Kobashi's burning hammer, the one-winged angel from Kenny Omega.
Well, that's his regular finisher, though.
But
that wouldn't be considered a super finisher just because it's not kicked out all the time.
Oh, well, you mean it doesn't always end the match?
No, it always ends the match.
Yeah, that's.
But so he doesn't use another move though.
Right.
A super finisher is something that he only breaks out and on a rare occasion.
Right, but it's still a super finisher. Because it's the move that ends the match.
I would say that John Cena's Super AA would be more of a super finisher than a regular finisher.
Okay. Anyways, Sting money, a term used in the 1990s used to refer to a lucrative contract, such as the one held by Sting in WCW.
It was a lot of money.
So, a prominent example today would be Brock Lesnar in WWE. Some Brock Lesnar money.
Right.
Spot monkey, derogatory term used to denote a wrestler who is believed to rely heavily on high spots in order to mask a lack of basic wrestling ability. I can't think of too many prominent examples. I wouldn't consider the Young Bucks spot monkeys because they actually do have good, they're good in the ring. But the spot monkey is meant for those who are not good in the ring.
I do hate saying this, but I feel like Jeff and Matt Hardy would kind of fall into that category.
Maybe.
Because they really just fell off of a bunch of things and used weapons for the most part. I mean, nothing against them. They really did revolutionize the industry. But if you would actually... When I hear Spot Monkey, that's what I think of for the most part. The Young Bucks actually have some rudimentary knowledge.
I would go off to, well, I wouldn't say that the Lucha Brothers are because they're using a different style of wrestling.
Right.
But yeah,
they would be considered more Spot Monkey here because remember, not every single terminology will mean the same thing.
Right.
Between countries.
Right. So anyways, smart. Having inside knowledge of the wrestling business, originally used to refer to those who were aware of the existence of kayfabe and the scripted nature of professional wrestling. The act of teaching someone inside knowledge of the wrestling business is referred to as smartening up someone.
They would also do this for rookies in the business.
Yes.
They would smarten up the rookies by doing, unnecessary
by
stuff.
telling them about the business, the kayfabe, the scripted nature, how that works. Especially,
we might need to break up this into multiple parts.
Well, that's what the thought is.
Oh, okay.
Anyways, a smark, which I referred to earlier, short for smart mark, someone who has inside knowledge in the wrestling business, but is not speaking from their own personal experiences with the business, and has typically obtained knowledge through dirt sheets, often used as a term of derision for know-it-all fans. I think that we're kind of in the middle. I think that we're smart, but we're smart. Like, we actually have a little bit of knowledge of the insides of how wrestling works.
Right. It's not like we're like, oh, I'm really smart about it. We're not, pretentious
Right.
about
We're not
it.
pretentious about,
It's not really so much of a thing anymore, but in the 90s when you do tape sharing and when the fucking newsletter was through a catalog that you get in the fucking mail, that is when you had smart marks.
Yeah. So second, I think this comes from the Carney days. Second is a person accompanying or seconding a wrestler to a match.
Yep.
Typically a manager, valet, or enforcer. The second is typically listed on the card alongside the wrestler they are supporting.
Yeah, that's entirely a Carney thing.
I thought that was pretty cool.
That is really neat.
Screw job. An unfair and controversial finish, all often including cheating or outside interference. A worked screw job is part of the story and is used to generate heat or sympathy. A shoot screw job occurs when the finish is changed without informing the losing wrestler. Obviously, we have some very famous examples of both worked and shoot screw jobs throughout the years, but we'll talk about Montreal screw job.
Well, I think it was called something else before.
It was, but the Montreal screw job is what named the term a screw job.
Right, and then there was the original one with Billy Sandow with the headlock and getting bitten, and at the time, if you bit your opponent, you would lose automatically.
Right.
And then also the MSG screw job with Fabulous Moolah as the Spider Lady and Wendy Ricker.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, well, let's go on to the next one. Schmoz.
I'm not sure. Do you like me doing the deleting
Yeah,
thing?
I do.
Okay.
Schmoz, or schmoz, z with two Z's. A match that ends in chaos rather than in a decisive finish, usually due to a number of wrestlers not involved in the match running in, preventing a clean finish.
Just pulling off like a fucking Vince Russo or something.
Right. Sandbag, to sabotage a throw by letting one's body go up instead of cooperating, which makes the throw much harder, if not impossible, to execute. This move is typically done deliberately to make the attacker appear weak or unskilled, but can also be as a result of a botch. Sandbagging can be dangerous as many moves require specific actions by the target to lower the risk of injury.
A famous example of this was Hardcore Holly, that people thought that he sandbagged Brock Lesnar going for a power bomb that ended up in Hardcore Holly breaking his neck.
Right.
So, and also Hardcore Holly said that he just he did not do it at the proper time.
Right.
He doesn't blame Lesnar, and Lesnar actually called him essentially like every single day and like made sure that he was okay. Right. So I think there was that great respect there. Go ahead.
All right. Next term is rushed finish, also known as an audible finish. A match finish which occurs sooner and often differently than planned. It is used when a wrestler is legitimately injured and cannot continue as planned. When the match is approaching its time limit or television segment is running long, after a botch significantly changes the plot of the match. The term audible is also used, referring to the finish being known to happen upon verbal instructions from outside the ring. So
Sting Jeff Hardy Victory Road, when Jeff Hardy was fucked up, Sting had to force him down.
That was a rushed finish.
And Eric Bischoff was like, please just pin this guy. We need to get out of this as quickly as possible.
Or Montreal Screwjob. It wasn't necessarily a rushed finish, but it was an audible finish.
It wasn't an audible finish because it still requires some form of cooperation.
Right.
God, what other would it be? There was a match with Chris Jericho and Neville like broke his ankle during a move, and they had to call an audible because Neville was really hurt.
Right. All right. Well, next one, ring general, an experienced wrestler who knows how to work a match to its full potential. Not a term. I mean, we all know what ring generals are, but we don't necessarily refer to them as ring generals. But like, you hear AJ Styles of the world or whatever. You know, someone.
AJ Styles, Christopher Daniels, blah blah blah.
Wrestling.
I just totally deleted the R, so it's Aslan.
It's wrestling, also known as wrestling, Southern style, or more specifically Memphis style. Originally, along with grunt and groan, used by mainstream media when presenting a derisive story of professional wrestling, which often stereotypes participants and audiences, now refers to a style of wrestling popular in the Mid-South region of Tennessee, Mississippi, and Arkansas. Primarily Memphis, Tennessee. As a result, the southeastern United States, which emphasized, kayfabe and stiffness generally, with fewer squash matches and longer feuds. Hence, the more recent Southern style, or to be specific, compared to the Carolinas, Jim Crockett, or Georgia styles. Memphis style.
Maybe we'll talk about like how culturally significant wrestling was in the South. I think
that would be but that's a whole show onto itself, though. But
I don't think people understand. I don't think people realize how big even like Memphis was at the time. It was basically wrestling mecca, other than like New York.
All right, this one I like, the potato. A strike to the head, which makes real contact. A wrestler who endures one or more potatoes is likely to potato the perpetrator back, which is known as a receipt.
Vader was a great example of this. He didn't do it intentionally, just because how big he was. Ronda Rousey also does this, but once again, it's from a person who did UFC, so a much different situation.
Right.
Go ahead.
Policeman or policewoman or a house shooter, a wrestler, often a respected or feared shooter or street fighter responsible for enforcing the promoter's will against recalcitrant wrestlers by performing unscripted or painful moves within a match, punishing or intimidating them for defying the management. In today's industry, it's largely outdated because such tactics are illegal if they can be proved. Typically, it's only still used in dirt sheets and outside commentators who believe one wrestler is deliberately placed in matches against more dangerous opponents and injured deliberately after disagreements with management. While allegations of this sort persist, including being made by wrestlers themselves, few have been proven. Also, a policeman or policewoman describes a wrestler who keeps the order of the locker room by threats of physical force.
The Undertaker was known for doing this.
Yes.
And also, another great example, it was a live version of this. Hardcore Holly, Chris Benoit, and Eddie Guerrero beat up Daniel Puder in the Royal Rumble.
Yes.
So that was another great example of that.
Yes. Okay. All right. Pipe bomb is a worked shoot promo where the wrestler giving the promo appears to break kayfabe and touches on real-life topics that are considered taboo, such as backstage politics or issues which are not typically addressed in storylines due to bad publicity. Of course, when you think pipe bomb, we think of CM Punk's famous pipe bomb right before he left.
Right. All right. Well, we're like 15 minutes, or actually almost 17 minutes in, so we will continue on with a final part, so stay tuned.
We'll take a short break.
Yes.
And we are back. So we're going to continue on this list here. There are a lot of things, a lot of terms, I guess, that are interesting. Let's go on with Pillmanize, the act of breaking an opponent's ankle, arm, or neck by placing it between the seat and headrest of a steel chair, then stepping or jumping on the chair, named for Brian Pillman, who suffered a severe ankle injury in kayfabe when attacked in this manner by Stone Cold Steve Austin.
I was not aware of that one. That's cool.
Yeah. So when you see that, it's called Pillmanize.
Oh, neat.
Philly Pop, the act of a promotion bringing in a former Extreme Championship Wrestling wrestler when in Philadelphia. very, very often the case. Whenever they go to Philadelphia, you have to bring in an ECW guy.
Right, where everyone just screams ECW. I didn't know that it had a specific thing.
All right, the Muda scale, an informal measure among some fans of the amount of blood lost by a wrestler during a match. The scale begins at 0.0 Muda, no blood, with 1.0 Muda being the equivalent of the blood loss of the Great Muda during an infamous 1992 New Japan Pro Wrestling match with Hiroshi Hase.
Huh. Oh, well, maybe we'll have to watch that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
A mechanic is a wrestler whose job it is to feud with the future main event performers to help them get ready for the position. Other times, mechanics are in-ring teachers helping younger wrestlers gain experience and ability.
Like Undertaker with Brock Lesnar,
Right.
John Cena, Kurt Angle with John Cena, Triple H with Roman Reigns more recently.
All right.
Here's our tie-in to Marty Jannetty.
Hooray. Also simply known as Jannetty. A derisive term given to a member of a tag team who, upon the breakup of the team, achieves markedly less success than their partner, coined in reference to Marty Jannetty, who teamed with Shawn Michaels to form the Rockers. While Michaels went on to be a 4-time world champion, 2-time WWE Hall of Famer, Jannetty was released from the WWF 2 months after the team's breakup and would repeatedly be hired and fired from the promotion and other promotions over the next 20 years, almost always participating in storylines which related him to the status as Michaels' former partner. Other wrestlers that is seen at Jannetty include a team of Rick Steiner of the Steiner Brothers, Stevie Ray of Harlem Heat, and Jim Neidhart of the Hart Foundation.
Right.
Yeah.
And then other people say, I'm the Shawn Michaels to your Marty Jannetty.
Right.
That's kind of where that came from.
Right. Lesbian pollen. When a female wrestler is lesbian in kayfabe to play mind games on her opponent. Examples of this are Dawn Marie, Tori Wilson storyline and the Trish Stratus, Mickie James storyline. And this one came from the OSW review, but I like that term, lesbian pollen.
Right. I also love OSW.
Lemon. A wrestler who is not over with an audience and is perceived as a failure.
Huh.
A lemon. So,
like Roman Reigns and back in the day.
Yes. Jerk the curtain. Everyone knows what a curtain jerker is. To wrestle the first match of the card. Refers to the curtain separating the entranceway from backstage. The wrestler commonly booked in this position is known as a curtain jerker.
Which now you don't really see a whole lot of that necessarily, like a consistent curtain jerker.
Right.
But yeah.
Yeah. Idol wrestler. So this is a Japanese term for Joshi wrestlers who are known for their attractive appearance and may be involved in the Japanese idol industry. Idol wrestlers often sing songs and model in photo books and or various video releases. So examples cited include Tanaka Inoue and Cutie Suzuki.
How you pronounce those correctly, I'll never know.
Hulking up, the type of comeback spot that involves a face suddenly start to no-sell their opponent's offense, recovering more strength with every blow before finally striking back, named after Hulk Hogan, who regularly used this as part of his matches.
And I would say that it made him more of a superhero than I think most people realize.
Yes. A Haas, a wrestler who is physically large but lacks other skills. A match between two large men who use plenty of stiff strikes is sometimes known as a Haas fest.
Brock Lesnar back in the day was a Haas, technically.
Yes. He still kind of is.
I think he knows his limitations now, just because it's Brock Lesnar. It's like, okay, you don't really.
It's kind of like Brock Lesnar and Goldberg.
Right.
Yeah, it's a Haas fest. A hooker, a wrestler with strong, legitimate, mat wrestling abilities and an array of match-ending or, in extreme cases, career-ending holds known as hooks. Hence the name. Primarily a holdover from the days where professional wrestling had to maintain kayfabe. A hooker would be used against a non-wrestler brawler to enhance the belief that professional wrestling was, quote, real. One of the most famous hookers in professional wrestling history was the world champion Lou Thesz.
That's so weird. I like it.
A gorilla position. Not in the ring. The staging area just behind the curtain where wrestlers would come out to the ring, named after Gorilla Monsoon. The gorilla position in WCW was named after Jody Hamilton, commonly referred to as the Jody position. In AEW, the Go position is named Dusty position after Dusty Rhodes. So it has different meanings, but it's that position right behind the curtain, right before they come out.
I think most people will actually say it's the gorilla position for the most part.
Go away heat. So this is kind of like X-Pac heat when a wrestler heel or face evokes a negative reaction, not through the working of the audience, but because the audience are not entertained by the wrestler and do not want to watch them perform. So kind of like Brock Lesnar.
Or Baron Corbin.
Go away heat.
With Brock Lesnar, they still get numbers. That's kind of that. Brock Lesnar doesn't have go away heat. Baron Corbin has go away heat.
Right.
Yeah.
Future endeavored. We all know where this comes from. Fired from a promotion, inspired by WWE's announcements of a wrestler's release, typically wishing the subject all the best in their future endeavors. 5 moves of doom, a particular combination of moves that a certain wrestler tends to use in every match, often in the same sequence, usually ending with their finisher. This term is usually used pejoratively, though it was not originally intended to do so, by Dave Meltzer, who coined the term in the 1990s to describe the finishing sequence of Bret Hart, and it is most notably used today to describe that of John Cena.
Or Roman Reigns, too.
Well, yeah, I guess he does have 5 moves of doom.
A couple of clotheslines, a flying clothesline, Superman punch, spear. There we go.
Okay. All right, so Ace in Peril. Also known as playing Ricky Morton. I like the playing Ricky Morton.
Well, yeah, because it's a general
So in a tag team match, the member of a face team who is dominated by the heel team for an extended period of the match. The tactic can be used to help get the crowd behind the face tag team and is usually followed up by a hot tag. During the 1980s, Ricky Morton of the Rock and Roll Express was typically in this position when teaming with Robert Gibson, so much so that playing Ricky Morton has become synonymous with the term.
That's interesting. I didn't know that it had like a name to it. That's
neat. So playing Ricky Morton. So anytime you see a tag team, one person's playing Ricky Morton.
It's a very easy thing.
It is. A dusty finish. A finish in which the face appears to win a big match, but the decision is later reversed due to some sort of technicality, such as interference by other heels to save the heel champion. As in most federations, the title could not change hands on such a disqualification. It can also refer to an ambiguous finish in a match where neither wrestler could claim to be the winner. The term Dusty refers to Dusty Rhodes, who booked many such finishes in the National Wrestling Alliance and later in WCW.
Oh. I thought it was a Dusty finish because he had those when he was facing Ric Flair. Not that he booked a lot of those.
No, I think it came from booking those.
Oh,
yeah.
Interesting.
A closet champion, a title holder, usually a heel who ducks top flight matches, cheats to win, often by managerial interference, and when forced to wrestle good opponents, deliberately causes themselves to be disqualified, since titles often do not change hands by disqualification to retain the title. So someone like Sami Zayn, when he was Intercontinental Champion.
Right, he would have Shinsuke and Cesaro do dirty work. Oh, all right.
Yeah. Cool. Chain wrestling, a sequence of traditional grappling moves usually employed near the start of a match, more common in Japan and Mexico than in the U.S.
Right.
A carpenter, a term for a wrestler whose purpose is to use their in-ring abilities to make their opponents look good and strong as possible. This is different from an enhancement talent in that a wrestler is used as a carpenter because they are recognized as having great in-ring abilities and experience. Often, but not always, a carpenter is an older, more experienced wrestler tasked with making less experienced wrestlers, often at the beginning stages of receiving a push, look like a credible threat before going on to their next program. In modern times, a carpenter is also used when a company is preparing to present a recent signee who may not be familiar to the audiences, in an effort to help the wrestler best showcase their abilities. Because of the skill and role in building the talent, carpenters are often regarded with a great deal of respect.
William Regal's a good example of that.
Yes.
That's literally the first name that came to my mind.
Yeah. So, William Regal. Nice. Camera kills. Empty seats that are not sold due to being right behind a permanent camera location, which would result in an obstructed view.
So, like, draping off where
the
hard camera angle is.
Right below it. Yeah.
Right.
Call it in the ring. To make up moves and storytelling in a match on the fly rather than rehearse them in advance. It is essentially the wrestling equivalent of improv theater. Yeah. Broadway, also going Broadway, a match that ends in a time limit draw.
Okay,
so now you have a name for it.
It doesn't happen all the time, but
it does. It happens in AEW because AEW does have those time limits. It doesn't happen as often in Japan, but right. So going Broadway is the term used for that.
Interesting.
Brett's rope, the second rope of a wrestling ring, the middle rope, often considered the most dangerous rope, named after Bret Hart. No idea why. It's just called Brett's rope.
Well, no, you know why? Because the Rockers faced the Hart Foundation for the tag team titles, and the Rockers won the WWF Tag Team Champions, but the second rope broke, so the match was called, not a thing, so the Hart Foundation kept the belts.
So yes, Brett's rope is the middle rope.
Oh.
Boom, boom, boom is a match segment often near the end of a tag or multi-party match when competitors perform their signature moves in quick succession. We see this quite often, so we call it a boom, boom, boom.
Oh, that's what we're going to call it now.
Yes.
The boom, boom, boom.
A bonzo gonzo.
It's fucking stupid.
An ending used in a tag team or other multi-party matches in which all wrestlers are in the ring and the referee cannot restore order.
You don't really see that a whole lot nowadays, but if I do see this, I'm going to say bonzo gonzo.
Yeah, it's essentially a match that ends in chaos, like when the referee throws the match out.
Oh, okay.
It's bonzo gonzo.
Like nobody wins. Okay, got it.
Bicycling, a now often obsolete practice used in the territorial era in which television tapes were distributed to stations within a promoter's territory.
That's so weird.
But bicycling is that was very important back in the day.
Right.
They kept that. Yeah, it was very important.
Right.
Apter Mag, an old-style professional wrestling magazine that sticks to kayfabe articles. The term often referred to the magazines at one time connected to the journalist Bill Apter, such as Pro Wrestling Illustrated back in the day. So, again, it's one of those magazines that are not, that they're just kayfabe. Whereas now...
Oh, it's like The Onion. Or is this The Onion, or...
It's not like The Onion, but they just produce fabricated stories.
So The Onion.
Maybe. Well, but it's not...
yes, it's The Onion for pro wrestling.
But it's not a satire.
Oh, I see.
It's not The Onion satire.
Okay,
this was kayfabe.
So it's more of like WWE Magazine, but independent.
Yeah,
WWE
exactly.
Magazine.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
An Andre shot, a camera trick by which a wrestler is made to appear larger by placing the camera below the wrestler and shooting upwards, named for Andre the Giant, a frequent subject of such camera shots.
Even though he really did not need to do that because he was 7'4".
But it's used today for people like The Big Show,
right,
like The Undertaker, like Kane, like Brock Lesnar,
right,
someone who you want to make...
Brock Lesnar's like really short.
Yeah. Roman Reigns.
I will never say that to his face because he could eat me, but still.
Okay. We only have 2 more terms here, and then we'll kind of wrap things up. An ace, a term typically only used in Japanese pursaru, for a wrestler designated as a face of the promotion. Not necessarily the same as top champion, but there are many examples, obviously, of this. But who would be the ace in the WWE today? There isn't really one.
No, they're not really. I would have said John Cena, but if he was there, Hiroshi Tanahashi in New Japan.
Yep.
He doesn't need it. Io Shirai when she was in Stardom.
Yes.
And then, oh God, I'm trying to think of in Impact Wrestling at the time. Tessa Blanchard was the ace of Impact Wrestling.
Yep, she was the ace.
Now, for the most part, it's Eddie Edwards. So,
yeah.
And Johnny Gargano for NXT specifically is another good one.
I would say so.
He's the ace of NXT.
He
puts on the most consistently good matches. He doesn't necessarily need a title.
Right.
And like I said, it doesn't have to be the top champion.
Right.
You can't say it's Keith Lee. When I think NXT, I think Johnny Gargano.
Right. And the final one that we have here is abort. To suddenly discontinue a feud, angle, or gimmick due to lack of fan interest, usually without explanation. Another carny term, obviously not used very much today because of the term abort.
But a good example of current times of
WWE seems to be doing a lot of aborting.
Yeah, they jump around, they oscillate. It's really annoying.
It is.
With Mustafa Ali and the hacker storyline that they were doing, building it up quite nicely, and then they just nope, I don't want to do that.
Right.
Well, fuck you then.
Right. So that's kind of all I have. Did you learn anything from our little excursion?
Yeah, I thought there was a lot of really cool terms and all of that from it, and I think that you really enjoyed the research for it.
Yes.
Sounds like you really did, because this was your topic.
It was. So what is the topic for next week?
So next week we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to do a review of WCW's New Blood Rising. So we're gonna do some MP throwback on the regular show because it's something that I have not watched. So maybe we'll
and if you want more, so next week if you really enjoyed the show and wanted more, please become a patron because we do this for those who do subscribe.
We do watch parties. So if you want to watch New Blood Rising with us and get really drunk and incredibly irresponsible, you can join us.
Right. Well, maybe not for this one, but definitely in the future.
Yes.
So we're just gonna give you a little taste of MP throwback, and then the next 2 weeks after that are going to be a lot of pay-per-views. So this is our last week of doing some fun shit. This next week is, and we'll get back to our regularly scheduled programming.
Because we have Emergence, we have SummerSlam nonsense, and at some point in time we're going to have Summer Struggle in Kuwato or whatever it is.
Right. So anyways, let us know actually what you thought about these pro wrestling terms. Let me know because I am very interested in knowing what your professional wrestling terminology is now.
I thought it was cool.
Now you have some great content for your first date.
Absolutely, you can tell
some
them.
Icebreakers.
Oh, that's a panty dropper.
Hey, you want a bonzo? Hey, you want to know what a bonzo gonzo is?
It's not what you think it is. But yes, become a patron. Follow us on all social media platforms so you know when we go live. Also, we do live tweeting for the pay-per-views too.
Yes.
And so we're very witty and very amazing. So definitely follow us.
Yes, of course.
And then follow us on all of the platforms that this podcast is on, and share with your friends, including your dog. So as always, be
majestic.